friends, welcome to or welcome back to the channel Jane Reads. And today I am giving recommendations for the Christian fiction bingo prompts for the month of May. So if this is the first video you're seeing about the Christian fiction bingo, I created this reading challenge for 2026. I will link the announcement video below. It has the link to the printables. It is not too late to join if you want to join, because you don't have to do the prompts in month order. And you do not have to do one book per prompt. You could combine the monthly prompts into one book and just use the same book for that number, those two numbers, I mean. So for example, for May, the prompt is set in Tennessee or a book set in the South and a 5-star prediction. So you could read a book set in Tennessee and a book you think is going to be 5 stars as two separate books, or you could find a book you think is going to be 5 stars set in Tennessee and combine them that way. And why is it set in Tennessee or in the South? That is because this prompt was given to me by Amanda from Book Lover Amanda, because her birthday is in the month of May. So be sure to go over to her channel early May and wish her happy birthday. And I had the opportunity of meeting Amanda in Tennessee back in September. And I have a book to talk about that I picked up during that trip. And so, yeah, it was really fun. Now, she did say set in Tennessee is a little bit difficult. So she added in the South because she's a Southern girly. In past years, she has hosted a readathon for May called the Southern Charm Readathon. So in the South just made sense. She is not doing that this year, but let's honor her with a book set in the South. So I have a bunch of recommendations for books set in Tennessee. Then I have recommendations for books set kind of around the area. North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Kentucky. Last year, I did a recommendations video, which I will link below, for books set in the Southern U.S. Now, I based the Southern U.S. states based on what the U.S. government considers southern states. There was some debate about some of those states included in that video, but hey, I was basing it on what the U.S. government provided me. So with me not being U.S., I had to go with what somebody, right? And that seemed more official than just somebody telling me, I think this, I think this. And so this year I've decided for the Southern will just be the ones kind of surrounding Tennessee a little bit. I know I've missed the other side of Tennessee, but I can only talk about so many books in one video. Like, my pile is quite high here. Okay, so let's dive right in. For Tennessee, I have my cheat sheet because I don't own all these books. I had to get a few from our church library, and they still don't have all the books. So the first author we're going to talk about is Michelle Shocklee. And I figure the first book might as well be the book that I picked up when I was in Tennessee, and I picked it up in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. And that book is The Women of Oak Ridge. This is set in Oak Ridge as per the title. It is 1944 and 1979. So we are following the characters of Maybelle in 1944 and Laurel in 1979. Maybelle is Laurel's aunt. We are learning about Maybelle's time working at I've just lost the name of it now, at the factory in Oak Ridge. Wow. It doesn't even tell me the back. Why? We even visited it, and I'm for the K-25. Wow. Where they helped build they separated uranium to help build the atomic bomb. And then Laurel in the 1979 comes to town for the summer to stay with Maybelle and kind of research the secret history of Oak Ridge. I really enjoyed this story. Like, I loved this story. I was so connected. And I think because we had visited the site of K25, the building is no longer there, but there is a museum that kind of takes you through parts of it and really tells you about the history of it, because people weren't allowed to talk about what they were doing at this time. So yeah, I highly recommend it. Another Michelle Shocklee book that made me want to visit a site that we did in September when we went to Nashville, and that is Count the Nights by Stars. This one is set in 1879 and 1961 in Nashville, and it really focuses around the Tennessee Centennial and the Parthenon that is there. And so after reading this book, I so wanted to visit the Parthenon just to see the building. Basically, we didn't go inside it. We just saw the building, and I loved it. It was such a fun stop. In this one, we are following two characters in the later timeline who are going through a scrapbook left by another character of her time around at the Centennial, like her time attending the Centennial, and finding out about that. I really enjoyed learning the history. This was not my favorite book, but it really helped me learn history. I just didn't connect with the characters as much as I would, like as much as I like to in books, but I still highly recommend it. And as I said, it made me want to go visit the Parthenon. Okay, another two Michelle Shocklee books that I do not own. And the first one I'm going to talk about is the very first one I read by her that I absolutely fell in love with. And that is All We Thought We Knew. This is 1942 and 1969. So World War II and the Vietnam War. And we are following a German student in 1942 who gets arrested because of his connections to Germany. And he gets sent to Tullahoma, Tennessee, to kind of a German encampment, I guess, like where they're keeping everybody. And then there is this lady that starts working at the camp and gets to know the male. Then in the 1969 timeline, we are following a female whose twin brother, or maybe just brother, no, I think twin, her brother anyways, has been killed at the Vietnam War. And then she comes back home to a horse farm where she grew up, and her mother is dying. And they don't have the best relationship. And so we're watching her try to solve, like kind of fix the relationship and deal with all the emotions of losing her brother and the possibility of losing her mother. And then there is journal and diary, something that is found, and finding letters, and that's how we find out what happened in 1942. I was so connected with this story. I absolutely loved it. And the last one is the one I most recently read, and that is Appalachian Song. This is set in the Smoky Mountains, and it is 1943 and 1973, and you are following a midwife who takes in a young pregnant girl who gives birth to a baby. Then in the later timeline, we are following two people trying to find the birth parents of one of them, and it all comes together in a really unique way, an unsuspecting way. And I really felt for what was going on in the 1943 timeline and what the family was putting the young girl through, and the way that the midwife and her sisters really cared for her and made her a part of their family. And then as things progress and you find out what happened, it was like, oh my God, like it was heartbreaking at times. So those are Michelle Shocklee books. Okay, then I have a Sarah Sundin, and that is The Land Beneath Us. And this is book 3 of the Sunrise at Normandy series. So yes, it is book 3 in a series, but if you've already started the series, this is the perfect time to pick up book 3 and continue, because this one is set in Tennessee. and it is a marriage and convenience story, and we are following those characters. We see them fall in love and deal with emotions of, because this is one of the brothers that the 3 books follow. And we know from books 1 and 2 that the brothers have a strained relationship. Something happened and it kind of all gets resolved in this book. And this is 1943, around World War II. And so, yeah, this is my favorite of the series. I just loved the characters in this one. And then we have Rachel Hauck. So we have 2. They're both set in Harts Bend, Tennessee, and they are considered a part of a series. However, they don't need to be read as a series. They are standalones. You just will see stuff mentioned or referenced in others, but you can easily read them as standalones. And those 2 books are The Wedding Chapel and The Wedding Shop. So in The Wedding Chapel, this is 1948 and 2015, and we are following Taylor in the 2015 timeline, who is a photographer. She comes to Harts Bend, Tennessee to do an article and take pictures of this wedding chapel that has been built by Jimmy in 1948. And so then we go back in time. Well, it wasn't built in 1948, but Jimmy started it in 1948. And you find the story. And Jimmy is now an older man. He's a football coach. And Taylor does meet Jimmy in the present day timeline and gets to talk to him. But then it goes back to the 1948 timeline. And we're following Jimmy as a much younger man. And what led him to building this wedding chapel. I absolutely loved this story. This definitely is my favorite of the wedding collection by Rachel Hauck. But this one, The Wedding Shop, is also really good. So this one is 1930 and 2016. So this one is considered book 2 of the series, and The Wedding Shop is considered book 3 of the series. Book 1 is not set in Tennessee. It is set in Alabama. So in The Wedding Shop, we are following Cora in the 1930 timeline, who is running this wedding shop and trying to keep it open during the Great Depression. Then in the 2016 timeline, we are following, what is her name? Haley, who decides to reopen the wedding shop. And we're following that journey. And do these 2 women find love along the way? Or is that kind of their future to just run this shop? Okay, then we have one that really looks like a Christmas book. It came out at Christmas time. But, I mean, I'd be remiss if I don't mention it. And that is The Bridge by Karen Kingsbury. This is set in Franklin, Tennessee, and it is set around a real bookstore that is operated. And I don't think the story is true, but the bookstore setting is true. And it's a sweet story about 2 college students that hung out all the time at the bridge while they were at college. And then we've got a husband and wife who are running the shop, and they kind of build a connection. But then the kids finish college and go their separate ways, and now they're kind of back, and we follow that. And the bridge, the store, is not doing well. And kind of how does it all come together? Okay, and the last author is Amanda Cox. So the first book is The Secret Keepers of Old Depot Grocery. This follows 3 generations of women. And so we are starts out in 1965, and we kind of follow times between 1965 and 1997. And then the present day timeline is 2021 with the granddaughter. So it starts out with the grandmother, and then we see the mother be born, like we see her come into the picture, and then the granddaughter in the present day comes in, and we watch these 3 women in the present day timeline trying to decide what to do with the Old Depot grocery. But we're getting to know the 1965, like the grandmother's early life, like when she got married. And I really enjoyed this. I so connected with the grandmother in this story. I want to say her name was Cora, but I could, Glorianne. And yeah, I felt for her so much and what she's gone through. And we don't get a lot of perspective from the mother, like the middle generation. There is some, but not a ton. Because then we're following the granddaughter who's going through some trials, and she comes to town to try to deal with, she has dreams, right? But the mother is kind of doesn't think those dreams are attainable or proper for her. And I love the way it all weaved together. And the men in this book, they, like, as much as I loved Glorianne, the men were so supportive of the women and caring. And I really love this one. And speaking of books I love, I would be remiss if I didn't mention The Edge of Belonging by Amanda Cox. This one, we have Harvey, who finds an abandoned baby at the side of the road. He is a homeless man, but he decides to care for the baby and try to raise the baby. Then, 24 years later, we meet the baby kind of grown up as a young woman. And she comes back to town after her grandmother has passed away, and she is finding out about her adoption story. And she knew she was adopted, but she didn't know everything about it. And so then we watch her discover, and the two timelines connect. Again, it was the men in this story that I absolutely loved. Like, I did enjoy Rose, or Pearl, who is the grandmother figure in this, but Harvey took my heart. And the last Amanda Cox book is The Bitter End Birding Society. This one I just read fairly recently. It is set in Bitter End, Tennessee, which isn't a real name of a place, but we are following Anna, who comes to Bitter End to try to reconnect with her Aunt Cora, right? I think so. I think it was Cora. I don't know. Trying to connect with her aunt that she never really knew. And this takes her along a journey and meets a bunch of people and joins like a birding society and goes on birding adventures, which I so did not expect to enjoy at all. But I did. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed this one. It is a little bit of a slower pace, but it is also goes back in time, and we learn about Violet and kind of what she went through at the time and the choices she needed to make between her family and the person that she loved, and what does she decide, and how do the stories connect. Again, I highly recommend it. Okay, so those are my Tennessee recommendations. Now I'm going to very quickly go through the other states. So let's start with South Carolina. No. Let's start with Kentucky. So we have Angela Carlisle's The Secrets of Kincaid series. Book number 1 is Secondary Target, and book number 2 is Shadowed Witness. And these are set in Kentucky. As I mentioned, they are romantic suspense. This one, for sure, Secondary Target, kept me guessing the whole way through. I had no idea what was going to happen. I also really enjoyed Shadowed Witness, so I highly recommend this series if you like suspense. And speaking of mystery, we've got The Hidden Springs Mystery by A.H. Gabhart. So this is Anne H. Gabhart. And book number 1 is Murder at the Courthouse. Book number 2... Yes, I'm like, do I have them in the right order? Book number 2 is Murder Comes by Mail, and book number 3 is Murder is No Accident. And this is a cozy mystery type series. Again, kept me guessing a bit, and I love that it's all set in the same town. We really follow the same characters throughout this series, so it was fun. And the last one I have for Kentucky is The Librarian of Boone's Hollow by Kim Vogel Sawyer. This is set during the Great Depression era. We are following Addie. Yes, good for me. We are following Addie, who is in school, finds out there's a problem with her funding, and she ends up taking a job as a pack horse librarian in the hills of Kentucky. And we just follow her with the struggles and the challenges of that, and doing things that she never expected to have to do or deal with. And she really has to rely on God. There's a ton of faith in this story. Now let's move on to South Carolina. So when I think of South Carolina, the author I automatically think of is Lynette Eason. A lot of her books are set in South Carolina or North Carolina because that is the area she is from. So it makes sense that she would set them there. So I do not own very many of her South Carolina books. I have one series, which is the Deadly Reunions series. It is romantic suspense. That is what Lynette Eason writes, is romantic suspense. And so we have Deadly Reunions. Book 1 is When the Smoke Clears. Book 2 is When a Heart Stops. And book 3 is When a Secret Kills. Again, we are following 3 friends throughout this series. They do make appearances in the earlier books, and then we keep following. So each friend shows up in each book. I really enjoyed this book, this series. This is actually on my rereads for this year that I'm hoping to reread. So maybe I'll start it in May. We'll see. Some other series by her is Women of Justice. I did not write down the book names, but the Women of Justice series, maybe I can look them up. Bad prep there, Jeanette. Book 1 is Too Close to Home. Book 2 is Don't Look Back. And book 3 is A Killer Among Us. This was the very first series I read by Lynette, and I fell in love with book 1 and book 2. They were my favorite. I could have done without book 3, but that's okay. I still recommend reading this series. Her other series is Elite Guardians, which follows female bodyguards. So book 1 is Always Watching, book 2 is Without Warning, book 3 is Moving Target, and book 4 is Chasing Secrets. And I loved this series as well. Book 3 is definitely my favorite of the series. I just connected with those characters the most, but I gave each book 4 or 5 stars in this series. I highly recommend it. North Carolina. As I mentioned, Lynette Eason also writes a bunch of books in North Carolina. Her Lake City Heroes series is set there. Her Extreme Measures series is set there. Another author that has a lot of books set in North Carolina, again, because she's from that area, is Lynn H. Blackburn. And so the series that I'm going to focus is her newest series, and that is the Gossamer Falls series. I only own book 1 and book 2 because book 3 just came out earlier this year. So book 1 is Never Fall Again, and book 2 is Break My Fall. And so again, this is romantic suspense. We are following cousins and friends throughout this, kind of focused around a family that have grown up together, and we're watching them have to deal with situations that happen in their life. In Never Fall Again, we have a single mother who has come to town to work at the resort, that kind of the haven, which is kind of the primary location of most of these books. And so she's come to town, but then her art studio, her pottery studio, gets vandalized. And what's his name? Callum is working with her to work on house plans, and then he gets involved in trying to find out. This is definitely more romance than suspense, but there is a bit of suspense in it. I fell in love with this book. And then book 2 is Break My Fall, where we are following Meredith, who is Callum's sister. Yes. Right? Yes, I think so. No, because she's Mo's sister. Callum's cousin. Maybe I need to refresh myself with the series. So Meredith is a dentist, and the male main character is the local police chief. And we do see them in book 1. Then book 3 is Last to Fall, which is Mo and Bronwyn's story. And we have met the two of them in the earlier books, and I was so anxious to get their story to find out, because there's been hints at it in the earlier books, and it did not disappoint. So I highly recommend this series. But really, Lynn H. Blackburn's books are all set in North Carolina. Okay, then we have an Amanda Cox, Between the Sound and Sea, and this one is a more contemporary timeline than historical. There is a little bit back where the kind of flashbacks to an earlier time, but it is much more contemporary. So we are following Joey, who is our main female character, who comes from Tennessee to North Carolina to help restore a lighthouse. She's looking for a break from her life in Tennessee. And she comes to help restore this lighthouse. She meets the grandfather and grandson, I think. It's been a little while. And they kind of find out the history of the lighthouse and why are they trying to restore the lighthouse. I was so invested in this. I love that they find little journal entries and they're trying to piece together the history. I really enjoyed it. And going with another suspense, we've got Carrie Stewart Parks, Relative Silence. And it says, a powerful family with dark secrets, a forensic artist with his own haunting past. The truth will determine whether she lives or dies. And so in this one, we have a hurricane happening, I'm pretty sure. But they're trying to find answers about a mystery that has happened. I was very hooked on this story. Okay, and the last North Carolina is Authentically Izzy by Pepper Basham. This is pretty much an epistolary book for the first 2/3 of the book, and then we get into kind of the normal conversation type third-person perspective that most of us are used to reading, but the first 2/3 for sure is really done in epistolary format with people, emails, text messages back and forth. But the main female character, why do I struggle with that? The main female character lives in Mount Airy, North Carolina, which I have visited on a different trip. So that was really cool because things they were referring to in this, I was like, oh, I know that. But then, I mean, they also refer to quite a bit with the Lord of the Rings, I want to say. I think it was the Lord of the Rings. I don't think it was The Hobbit. I don't know. One of the books that I haven't read, so I didn't fully understand all of it. But I really enjoyed this. And then later on, it does go to the fictional island of Skymar. But a lot of it is set in North Carolina. And it is contemporary. Okay, and the last state is Georgia. So I have a series, and this is a contemporary romance series, and that is the Georgia Coast Romance series. So obviously set in Georgia. And so book 1 is A Sparkle of Silver. Book 2 is A Dazzle of Diamonds. And book Book 2 is A Glitter of Gold, and book 3 is A Dazzle of Diamonds. And this is by Liz Johnson. And these are contemporary romance with a bit of mystery in them, as each character in them is trying to research something and find answers to different situations. So there is definitely mystery in this. Sparkle of Silver, they find a diary and they're trying to piece together pieces of the past. Then we have the Southern Crimes series by Lisa Harris. And again, I did not look up the title. So book 1 is Dangerous Passage. Book 2 is Fatal Exchange, and book 3 is Hidden Agenda. This is another romantic suspense story where you are following the same characters throughout the story, and there's a main storyline that connects, like follows through all 3 books. While each book deals with its own story, there's another story that continues throughout. So you have to read this series in order. And I just really, really enjoyed this. I enjoyed this much more than I expected to enjoy it. And I need to pick up more Lisa Harris books. Okay, and the last one is Aftermath by Terry Blackstock. This one is another romantic suspense. We are following a bombing that happens at a concert. And so we follow somebody who has been framed as the bomber. And then we're following somebody who was in attendance at that concert and they got out and their friends did not, and kind of the aftermath of that and dealing with it. But also, like, who is framing this person and why? I really enjoyed getting both perspectives and following that. Like, the police are trying to find answers, and I felt for that person that's being framed and why are they being framed and who is framing them. Like, I was totally invested in the mystery, but then with the person that was at the concert and the aftermath and the emotions that they're dealing with, I really felt for them as well. This was a 5-star read book. This was a 5-star read both times I read this book. Like, I highly recommend it, but know that it deals with some traumatic events. Okay, so what do I plan on reading to fulfill this prompt? I have one option for a book set in the South, and I have 3 options for books set in Tennessee. So let's talk about just the one that is set in the South first. This one is set in Kentucky, and it is Along a Storied Trail by Anne H. Gabhart. It is a historical fiction, and we're following a Kentucky packhorse librarian. Tansy doesn't mind the rough trails and the long hours as she serves her Appalachian mountain community during the Great Depression. Yet she longs to find love like the heroines in the books she loves. When a charming writer comes to town, she thinks she might have found it, or is the perfect man actually closer than she thinks? This sounds very similar. Where's the book? Oh, it's buried. It sounds very similar to The Librarian in Boone's Hollow. So I'm very curious to see, like, which one am I going to enjoy more? How similar are they? And I love this cover. We've got the horse. I love this skirt front. Yeah, I just really love this cover. It's really the first reason I picked up the book. Okay, so that is Kentucky. Then my Tennessee options are Under the Tulip Tree by Michelle Shocklee. This one is set in Nashville. That's about all I really know about it. I don't own the book, so I don't have the back description to give you. But yeah, I want to read Michelle Shocklee to zero. This one is also a 26 and 26 book for me, so this one, very high on the list. The other 2 that are set in... Wait, that one's not set in Tennessee. I was lied to. It says Memphis and South Carolina. That is not Tennessee. Wait, Memphis is Tennessee. Wait, I knew that. Right? Yes. Oh my. I need to end this video. Okay. Before We Were Yours by Lisa Wingate. So we have Memphis, Tennessee, 1939. And we have Aiken, South Carolina, present day. So it's set, from my understanding, I'm not going to read the rest of it because I don't want to, but my understanding, this is a very emotional read. And Before We Were Yours, I'm guessing has to do with adoption and stuff. I've heard people rave about this book, but warn that it's emotional. So we will see. Then the last book is The Pink Bonnet by Liz Tolsma. This is 1933 Memphis. That's funny. This is part of the True Colors series, so it is a historical suspense. And it says, widowed in Memphis during 1933, Cecil is struggling to provide for her 3-year-old daughter, Millie. Cecil unwittingly trusts a neighbor who puts little Millie in the clutches of Georgia Tan, corrupt Memphis, Tennessee children's home director, suspected of the disappearance of hundreds of children. With the help of a sympathetic lawyer, their search for Millie uncovers a deep level of corruption that threatens the very lives. How far will a mother go to find out what happened to her child? Oh my gosh, that sounds heartbreaking. But yeah, it just says something sinister overshadows the Tennessee children's home. So those are my 4 options. I do not own the Michelle Shocklee book, but those are my 4 options to read. If you've read any of these 4, please let me know which one I should put at the top of my list. As I said, right now, Under the Tulip Tree is at my top because it's the 26 and 26. But why not read more than one book that's set in Tennessee or the South? I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video today, and I hope I've given you some recommendations so that you could fulfill the prompt if you are participating. If you're not participating, maybe I've just encouraged you to pick up a book from the southern U.S. states. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye.